So it's
All
all
right.
yours, Dan.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, everybody. Chad, thanks for keeping everybody occupied with Puff during the technical difficulties. But look forward to talking to everybody today about strategically and effectively representing investor clients. For those of you that know me, you know that most of my niche in real estate is investors and working with investors. And we're going to talk a little bit today about the hows, the whys, the whats, and all the important questions. So let's move on to the next page, please. There we go. All right, unbelievable statistics. Go ahead and click, Wayne. There's going to be a lot of clicking here. So according to Redfin, 1 out of every 4 single-family homes bought in the United States in 2023 were purchased by an investor. I was doing a training here at the office one day, and I asked our group of agents how many of them are currently working with investors, and only a couple were actually working with investors. So this number and the next number, go ahead and click, Wayne. According to Bigger Pockets, $32 billion was spent in Q4 in 2023 by investors. Go ahead and click, Wayne. Just reread the above statements. I mean, if you look at that, these came from 2024 Fuel. I attended a session taught by Bigger Pockets, and they were talking about what we're going to be going over today. Think about what commission is off of $32 billion in one quarter. And if that doesn't want to make you figure out how to network and work with investors, I'm not sure which statistic I can show you to make you want to work and find out how you can represent investors in the buying and selling of real estate. Go ahead to the next slide. This one here is a graph, again, from Redfin, and it just shows you over the last 24 years how the investor purchases have gone up, down, but ultimately up and then back down again. You can see where that dotted line is, which is really interesting. That's when the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 as a pandemic. You saw what happened. It immediately dropped because the whole world stopped functioning as we know of. But then look at what happened into 2021 to 22 and 23, that the largest spike ever where investors were purchasing a lot of real estate, a lot. Now it's down a little bit from that high peak, but as you can see, it's still solid in 2024. And we're going to go over shortly why it's important to work with investors. Go ahead and click onto the next page. Go ahead and click. All right, so who are the investors buying property? The average Joes, I like to call them. So that's a picture of myself and 3 of my buddies. We were just on a golf trip this past weekend. 2 of my buddies in that picture became real estate investors in the last couple of years. And they work a separate W-2 job, but yet they wanted a place to put their W-2 income in. I talked to them about real estate investing. One of them in particular went headfirst into it and bought a lot of property. The other one's bought a few properties, and he's taking it on a slower rate. But these average Joes that are out there, whether it's your family, your friends, coworkers, there's a lot of people out there that are buying rental properties, real estate as investment properties. I think if you start talking more about it, you're going to figure out that people on your street, neighbors, are interested in investing, but they don't have a mentor. They don't know the who, what, when, where, why. They don't know the details of how to get investing. And that's where you come into play as a real estate agent. And we're going to go over a little bit of this here in this presentation. Go ahead and click. The next large investor is corporate America. So those are what we call institutional buyers, are still a huge force in the housing market with a focus on single family rentals. So a lot of these institutional buyers they buy in bulk. They just don't buy 123 Main Street in Cincinnati, Ohio. They buy the whole subdivision. And the way this works is these institutional buyers will actually work out a deal with the builder. So, for example, if a builder of a new subdivision in Mason, Ohio is planning on building 300 homes, a rough rule of thumb is the builder needs to sell half of those homes quickly in order to make the money on the second half of the homes. So what the institutional buyer does is they create a contract, an agreement with this builder and says, we will buy all 300 of your homes, but they obviously then get it at a discount. And when you have the deep funds and the deep pockets of these institutional buyers, that definitely is harder for first-time home buyers. It is harder for the average Joe. And again, that's where the average Joe investor needs to rely on the real estate agent to be able to bring them deals that make sense. Go ahead, click next. Okay, click. Why represent investors? So investors, they invest and buy in good markets and bad markets. Many of you know that I quote Rich Dad, Poor Dad over and over throughout the year. And Robert Kiyosaki always says that the sophisticated investor makes their money in bad markets. Most people on planet Earth, they do not want a bad market because that means high inflation. That just means things cost more. That means they're struggling with jobs. Real estate investors love bad markets because they can get properties for pennies on the dollar. But what people don't understand is real estate investors are still buying in good markets as well. Why? Go ahead and click the next. They take the emotion out of buying real estate. As real estate agents, we've all been there where we're showing husband, wife, first-time home buyer 30 properties, and they might not like the look of it or the way that the paint is, or they just can't see little 2.5 kids running around the living room because they're emotionally attached to that real estate when they're viewing or selling. Investors are not emotionally attached to the real estate. Investors look at it with dollars and cents. Go ahead and click next. And it's a numbers game. And we're going to walk through the numbers game here in a little bit. But that is why it's so important to make sure when you're building your sphere of influence, a portion of your sphere should be investors. I know a few of you on here, a few agents that are out of this office that you already ahead of the game. You have investors as clients as a real estate agent. So that is why you want to represent investors. They buy in good markets, they buy in bad markets, they take the emotion out of it, and it's a numbers game. Go ahead and click. Okay, residential versus commercial. So with residential, you're looking at 4 units and under. And the reason I'm going over this is one thing that you're going to have to do to be taken seriously as a real estate agent representing an investor is you have to know the lingo. If you don't understand that there's a difference between residential and commercial and the number of units in a multifamily, an investor is not going to trust you with a $300,000 or a $3 million purchase of that investment property. So residential 1 to 4, keep clicking, Wayne. Pros, residential when it's a 4 unit or under are easier to buy because you can get 30-year fixed rates. They're easier to sell, they're easier to finance, and they're easier to manage. I know a lot of people that manage their properties that are 4 units and under. I myself managed my properties when they were 4 units and under. Go ahead and click. A condo is fewer doors. So if you're buying single family homes, if you're buying duplexes, triplexes, 4 units, you're going to have fewer doors for the money that you are spending in order to acquire those properties. Now, on the other hand, with commercial, go ahead and click. 5+ units, click. Pros, more doors equal more cash flow. If you can leverage your money into a larger complex, the rule of thumb is more doors, more cash flow. A con, though, is they're harder to finance. When I say harder to finance, usually that means you're looking at a 25% down payment. There's something called a DSCR, which they're going to take into context. They're harder to sell because when you get to 5+ units, it shrinks the number of potential buyers out there. They're also harder to manage. I've managed a complex years ago that I bought that was more than 5 units, and I got what I tell people, a master's degree in property management, because I had to learn, and it was just a time drain on my life. Go ahead, click. So if you want to make small amount of money, buy small buildings. If you want to make large amounts of money, buy large buildings. That is a quote from Ken McElroy, who is one of Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad's chief advisors. Ken McElroy wrote a great book on investing in real estate. Big fan of his. I follow him on social media. But that's just a quick little difference between the difference of residential and commercial buildings when you are talking to a potential investor about buying. Go ahead, click. All right, basic numbers to run for single family. Go ahead, Wayne, just click through these. Principal and interest, mortgage, property taxes, insurance. The above is known, it's an acronym called PITI, which is principal, interest, taxes, insurance. When you run numbers for a single family home for an investor, you better get really good at understanding your PITI, principal, interest, property taxes, insurance. Then you're also going to have to figure out, is your investor going to managing this property by themselves, or are they going to be using another property management company, and there's going to be a fee associated with that. Also, HOA fees. Is this single family home or a single condo that you're purchasing, do they have an HOA fee? Go ahead and click. Principal and interest of mortgage. So there's a great website that I've been using for over 20 some years called brettwhistle.net. This guy has an amortization calculator. He's got everything. You can print out just the basics or the full 30 years. It's incredible. I love his website. It's a little more old school, but like I said, I've been using it for a long, long time. You can also use the Chicago Title One app. There's a quick little app that you can use on your phone that you can pop up the principal and interest of a mortgage. Go ahead, Wayne, click. Biggerpockets.com also has different calculators that you can use in order to get your PI. Things to consider, though, when you have to put in the information to brettwhistle.net, Chicago Title One app, BiggerPockets, you have to know things, purchase price. You have to know the mortgage rate. You have to know the length of the loan amortization, meaning sometimes in a commercial property, you only might be able to get a 20-year amortization. If it's a 4-unit and under, you might get the 30-year. Down payment's going to differ between 5, 10, 20, 25. I've even seen some commercial properties that they requested a 30% down payment for one of my clients. So you're going to have to know that information in order to put it into any one of these calculators or software programs in order to calculate your principal and interest. Go ahead and click. Property taxes, always, always, always go to public auditors' websites. Click. Do not use Zillow, Realtor.com. Do not even trust your MLS, because that is any one of us going into the MLS and inputting those numbers. I've seen an investor and his agent get burned. It wasn't me, but I've seen them get burned because they trusted a Zillow.com and they ran their numbers on a building thinking those were the accurate property taxes. Those were not. Go to your auditors, your public auditors' websites in order to get property taxes. When I am teaching a new agent, I show them how to go to your public auditor's website and find a property tax for a property. If you have never done that before, even though you're a real estate agent, I would highly recommend playing around with different counties' websites because they're all different. So for example, here in Cincinnati, Ohio, we have 4 major counties that we do business in, from Hamilton, Warren, Butler, and Claremont. 4 all surrounding the city and including the city, but they're all different in how you navigate their website in order to find the right property taxes. Also, school districts can affect property taxes. Make sure you understand that. My brother just moved into a very nice house in a school district in Cincinnati. His is the last house of one school district. His neighbor is another school district. And the difference between his and the neighbor, the property value is enormous just because the line separating their 2 houses. Click. And then finally, a drop and swap. Many of you have probably never heard of what a drop and swap is. This is a way for you to save your investor money on a purchase of a rental property. So what a drop and swap is, if Wayne is the seller of a 4-unit apartment building and his LLC owns the building and it's called 123 Main Street LLC, and I am representing the buyer. The buyer wants to buy 123 Main Street LLC. Every time a transaction takes place, when it's especially 4 units and under, the auditor will flag that and they want to reassess the value to the new purchase price. That, of course, is going to raise your property taxes as the buyer of this investment property. A drop and swap is a way for your buyer or you, if you ever buy investment property, to get around the immediate increase of property taxes. A drop and swap is where my buyer that I'm representing will purchase Wayne's LLC. The LLC owns the real estate that's sitting on the land that the LLC owns. When you have a transfer of an entity from one person to another, that does not flag the county auditor, and you will have a few years before it is reassessed. Now, I'm not saying that that happens in every case, but there is a very high percentage of success in the greater Cincinnati area with the drop and swaps. And that is a very common transfer of entities to use between investors. I currently have a 7-unit from an investor of mine that we have pending. We close in 2 weeks. The buyer is doing a drop and swap. The buyer is purchasing my seller's LLC, and the LLC owns the building on the property. Therefore, the new buyer in Hamilton County, which the city of Cincinnati is in, they just did reassessments last year in 2023. There's a good chance the new buyer will not get his property taxes raised for another 3 to 4 years before they do another reassessment of buildings in the county. So that's a little bit about property taxes. The reason I'm talking to you about the drop and swap is you want to be able to speak the lingo to these investors. That's how it's going to separate you as a real estate agent from all the other ones that are trying to get his or her business. All right, let's talk insurance. Go ahead and click through some of these. Wayne, shop, shop, shop. Your investors should be shopping insurance. That is one thing that your investor has the power to do. Your investor cannot, successfully cannot fight property tax increases. Sometimes you can, but most of the time you're going to lose out on that. Insurance you can control. Me personally, I had a apartment complex that my business partner and I bought a little bit ago, and we had 3 bids on insurance, and it ranged from $2,000 a year up to $6,000 a year. That is a huge chunk of cash flow. So make sure you shop around and get the best insurance for your investor. Umbrella insurance. Umbrella insurance is something that I would recommend you as a real estate agent recommending to your investor. Again, this is another way that's going to separate you from all the other real estate agents that don't know how to work with investors. When you say, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, I know you want to buy this 4-family, you want to do a drop-in swap, I would recommend that you also talk to your insurance agent about an umbrella policy. What an umbrella policy does is the umbrella policy attaches to the LLC. So for example, if my buyer bought Wayne's 123 Main Street, the 4-unit, I am going to have my buyer purchase umbrella insurance on that property for 1 year. Umbrella insurance is $250 a year. That is cheap to investors. But what that umbrella insurance does is it's $1 million policy. At least that's how I have it set up through my umbrella insurance. $1 million policy. Now, a buddy of mine is my insurance agent, works for State Farm. He told me that insurance companies are notoriously tight. They're cheap. They don't want to spend a single cent if they don't have to. That's how they make money, right? So if you have regular insurance, fire and dwelling on your rental property, and something happens or you get sued, then they go right to that policy. If you have umbrella insurance and $1 million policy on that building, the person suing you, whether it's a tenant, whether it's somebody that slipped on a icy sidewalk, whatever, whoever sues you has to go through $1 million of insurance money before they would ever get to your policy, your fire and dwelling policy on that investment property. Guys, it's a no-brainer. If you represent investors and they don't have an umbrella insurance, to me, it's crazy. It makes me sleep better at night knowing that all my properties have umbrella insurance and it's very, very cheap. And again, you have to get, somebody suing you has to get through all of that. It's much harder, in my opinion, for somebody suing you as an investor to get through an umbrella policy than it is to get through your LLC. So if you want to double up, the best part for your investor would be to have an umbrella policy and your LLC, and that really protects you against potential lawsuits. Renter's insurance. You can request your tenants to have renter's insurance. I have seen multiple leases where investors or property management companies say, in order to rent 123 Main Street, you must show me proof of renter's insurance. Some people don't. I personally have never required my tenants to have renter's insurance, but each is their own. For example, at the bottom I just put here, in the greater Cincinnati area, one of my single families costs $569 a year for insurance. That's fire and dwelling. Duplex I've got costs $661. So insurance, make sure you shop around for that. But again, if you do not have umbrella insurance on your rental properties, you're really missing out on an opportunity to cover your butts or your investors' butts. Go ahead and click, Wayne. All right, go through and click 3 or 4 more. So this is just an example, Wayne, or everybody, of expenses I'm going to walk you through. This was a condo that I purchased a few years ago, and I just want to go over the expenses associated with it. So purchased it for 80 grand, say put 20 down, which is 16 grand. Mortgage is 64, interest rate's 4.75. Go ahead and click. 30-year fixed on it, click. Total monthly payment of principal and interest after I went to brettwhistle.net comes out to be $333.85 for this property. Click. Property taxes, $721.56 a month because I went to the auditor's page. Divide that by 12 months, $60.13. The insurance is cheaper because this was a condo. It was only $190 for the year. Comes out to be $15.80 per month. HOA fee was $200 a month. I have ERA Property Management managing this one, $63 per month. Click. Total expenses, $672.78. Click. Monthly rent is $1,050. It's actually up to $1,150 now. But I would go to rentameter.com in the greater Cincinnati area. That's who ERA Property Management uses to find out what you can get for a property rent-wise. I use that for my rental properties. I buy the Pro Edition that's on my phone. It's $79 a year for rentameter.com. It's a write-off. It's a business expense, but it's also, I run numbers constantly for myself, for my investor clients. So I need Rent-A-Meter by my side. I'm using that. That's how I know how to run the numbers. You got to get what the rent can go for and what the total expenses are to find out. Go ahead and click, Wayne. So we're going to take $1,050 from rentameter.com, subtract the $672, comes out to be a total cash flow of $377.22. According to Rich Dad Poor Dad, how many properties should I try to buy that make that much per month? His answer was classic: as many as you can. So when you've got something cash flowing, you buy as many cash flowing properties as you can. So in order to run the numbers, you've got to know all the expenses and you've got to know what that single family home will rent for using rentameter.com. Rentameter also goes over the median rent, the average rent, the 75th percentile, meaning say you went in there, gutted the place, brand new LVP flooring, brand new kitchen, brand new bath. They're going to show you what you can get the top 75% get. Then also, if you're trying to rent a property on Rent-A-Meter and it needs updating, it needs work, they will show you what the bottom 25% rents are in the area. So you can know a variance from 25 to 75 and then the average and mean. Go ahead, Wayne. All right. Don't worry about that practice. I was going to do a practice, but we'll move on in the interest of time. All right. Here we go. Analyzing multifamily properties. Useful terms. Again, guys, if there's one thing that you take away from this presentation, know your vocab. Because again, if you meet an investor, where I'm going to talk about how to meet investors, and you can't talk cap rate, they're going to ask you a question. Well, what's the current cap rate of this area? If you don't know what cap rate is, they're going to move on to another agent. Know your terms. So cap rate, net operating income divided by property value, inverse relationship. Cap rates can be used to analyze regions, and it's a great way to compare properties. That's what cap rates do in commercial multifamily real estate. You can compare 85-unit apartment complex to a 7-unit apartment complex and value what it is per door based on cap rates. Understand what cap rates are. Go ahead, Wayne. Cash on cash return. So, percentage rate measuring the cash returned on the cash invested. One thing that you guys need to know when you're talking to investors, what do your investors want ultimately? Every investor is different, meaning some investors care about cash flow. Some care about cash on cash return. Some care about internal rate of return. Some people care about the gross rent multiplier. Go ahead, Wayne, click. Gross rent multiplier shows the amount of time it takes the gross annual income of the building to pay for the property. So you can take the sale price divided by the gross annual rental income to get your gross rent multiplier. Again, I'm not expecting you guys to be whizzes with this. I've been an investor since 2004. I'm passionate about it. I love reading about it. I love talking about it. I love teaching about it. So we don't have time to go in depth on this, but anybody that wants to sit down on a phone call or Zoom, I'm more than happy to really dive deeper into these terms. Go ahead, Wayne, move on. Things to consider: vacancy rate. Do not assume that all your properties will be rented 100% of the time. Cincinnati's average, this was as of a year ago, about a year and a half ago, was 3.6. Right now, it is down to about 1%. If you have a rental property in the greater Cincinnati area and it's somewhat clean and it's somewhat in a safe area, you have got a waiting list of people to rent. I won't get into all the details, but we had an appraiser come in who is really, really smart. He goes to Washington, D.C. He gets invited to a think tank every year to present on numbers. And he believes that Gen Z will be the first generation of renters in the last 100 years. Why? Because the baby boomers, which is a huge population, are selling to the millennials, which is another huge population. They're exchanging real estate right now. That leaves Gen Z on the outside. They don't have property to buy. Guess what? They're going to be renting. So the whole point is it's a great time to be a landlord because vacancy rates are super low. The supply and demand in the United States, it makes it look very positive for landlords for the next 30 years. All right, move on, Wayne. Commercial properties come with more expenses than residential. For example, property management. Property management, depending on who you use, can cost anywhere from 6% to 8% to 10%. Then, if you get into vacation areas such as Southwest Florida, where some of you on this call are from, I know property management can go up to 20, 25%, even higher if they are doing Airbnbs, things like that. So shop around, but you need to know this stuff. So when you talk to an investor and say, I'm pretty sure I can get you property management for 8% for this building. Maintenance, understand maintenance costs that go into it. For example, go ahead, click, Wayne. Common area maintenance, which is referred to as CAM, common area utilities. So if you have coin-operated washer and dryer in your investment properties, which I highly recommend. Oh my gosh, the amount of quarters that you can rack up by having coin-operated in your buildings is amazing. Here's another tip. Do not go with that stupid contract where you contract out a washer and dryer company and they get half. Don't do that. Buy the $1,200 washer, buy the $1,200 dryer, slap them in there for $2,400. Trust me, you will make up that $2,400 in the first year of getting coin-operated laundry. I could go on and on about that, but that's for another day. Landscaping, snow removal, you need to budget that in there. Again, you need to be able to run the numbers correctly to send to your investor to say, this is what you can expect. This is the cash flow. If you mess up and don't include landscaping and snow removal, lawn mowing, snow removal, boy, that can cut your investor's profit significantly. Do you think that investor, when he gets the shock of, well, we didn't account for this, do you think he's going to use you again? Nope. Do you think he's going to use another agent again if the other agent made this mistake? Nope. He's going to go to an agent that knows what the heck they're doing, and I want that to be you. Go ahead, click. Contracted work, larger properties sometimes have janitorial, security. I contracted out with a cleaning company once just to do hallways, common areas, pick up trash around the property, just so property management didn't have to do that. So I didn't have to do that. So certain larger properties, you're going to get into larger expenses, but you budget that into the numbers. All right, let's move on to the next page. Things to consider. Each metric and evaluation technique has its drawbacks. Click. So, for example, cash on cash gives you a better idea of return than return on investment when debt is used. If you buy it cash, if your investor pays cash for that investment property, cash on cash return is not going to be a great way, a great metric to show him, right? Because you want the debt to be used to show your cash on cash return. Your return on investment does not take into account time. So an efficient investment could have a lower return on investment than a less efficient property due to the amount of time needed to realize a specific return. Again, some investors want a specific return on their investment, and that's all they care about. So you have to build that out into what is called a waterfall analysis. I learned about a waterfall analysis about 4 years ago, and it's really for larger properties. And now I can value out a property for a 10-year period, and they call it a waterfall because as you see the rents going up and the debt service, the mortgage going down, it's really a unique situation. Really cool, but again, that's for pretty advanced investing. Go ahead and click. The gross rent multiplier does not take into account expenses. So to me, I'm not a big fan of gross rent multiplier. I really don't care. My investors don't care how long it's going to take to pay back that property or pay off that property. Expenses are one quick way to buy a property from an owner or a management company that has not been managing it correctly, cut expenses, make it efficient. Your NOI goes through the roof. It's crazy how that works. So good and quick way to start analyzing a property before digging deeper. All right, go ahead and click. Net operating income does not take into account capital investments, property taxes, or the cost of financing. So that is kind of unique. And even though an NOI is going to help you figure out the value of a property or your cap rate, it does not take into account CapEx. So when you hear the term CapEx, those are capital expenditures, capital improvements to the building. Those are your big ticket items, your roof, large turns on a unit where you're doing floors that you won't have to do for 20 plus years, appliances. CapEx might be redoing the hallways. So capital expenditures are larger expenditures that aren't going to be on your yearly T12. T12 means you're trailing 12 months. All right, Wayne, move on. Here's a quick example of a spreadsheet how I use for a certain investor to show the property type of one I did, 12 beds, number of baths, 6, the list price. So just remember this, guys, when you represent investors, the list price is just a list price. Don't just put the list price down in your numbers because you know what? If the list price doesn't work for your numbers, then move it down. Say 375 grand for this 3-unit townhome complex. Say that did not get my investor the net cash flow that he was looking for. What if I dropped that list price to 325, ran the numbers, the principal and interest on his mortgage went down, maybe that got him up to $700 a month, and maybe that worked for him. So he said, write an offer, put it in at 325 and tell the seller, take it or leave it. Sometimes you're going to meet investors that do that. Is it a lot of work on your part to write 15 offers on 15 properties? Absolutely. The rule of thumb when you are running numbers on investment properties, you're going to run the numbers on 100 investment properties to find 10 that really make sense, to go view those 10, and then write offers on those 10 if you like what you saw when you viewed them, to see if you could get one that accepts your offer. That's a general rule of thumb. I've written so many contracts for my investor clients. Sometimes it's stressful. I get it. But I also would rather have these investors buying in good markets and bad markets and not just waiting for my sphere of influence that are buying single family homes, to call me. So Running numbers is time consuming, but you get better at it. You practice it. Then you can see in the lower right-hand corner your analysis where you take the net operating income, you divide it by the cap rate. So I give 4 examples of the cap rate for this area, 6, 7, 8, 9%. Then it comes up with your value for that property. So based on this net operating income of $25,516, and say this is a 7% cap rate, that values that property at $364,514. That tells me that that $375,000 purchase price is too much. All right, go ahead and click, Wayne. Here's just another property that I wanted to show of one that I actually did acquire for my client. This was years ago, and we acquired it. The list price was $300,000. We acquired it for $287,000. This was just a couple years ago. My investor got these rents bumped from $560. He's up to $800 a month per unit now. We are under contract closing in 3 weeks on this property. My investor's selling it now, and we've got it under contract for $100,000 more for what he bought it for, because he was able to boost the NOI so much. So that's how you value the investment properties. Go ahead, Wayne. All right, let me go through this quickly. Key takeaways. Previous examples are properties that are predominantly turnkey, meaning they didn't have major roofs to repair or replace. They didn't have major work that needed to be done in the realm of rewiring a 4-unit for $30,000 from aluminum wiring to get up to code. Didn't have any of that. Go ahead, click. In others, the future NOI projections are helpful. You always want to do that projection of what the current rent is and then what the future rent is to get it up to market rents. That's going to be able to help project your NOI for your investor. Things to consider. Capital improvements need to be taken into consideration. If you get an inspection done on a 10-unit property for your investor, and they say that rubber membrane roof has 2 to 3 year life expectancy, and it's going to cost $25,000 to replace that, you better build that into your consideration of your offer on that building. Go ahead, Wayne. If there are no tenants, lease-up periods needs to be estimated and accounted for, meaning that could be called loss to lease. So therefore, if you don't have a tenant in 2 of the 4 units when you buy a 4-family, you better find out what it's going to take to get those 2 investment properties up and running in order to be able to get that fully leased. Go ahead, Wayne. Inflation on your potential gross income and operating expense. You can do that in the waterfall analysis where you can add in whether it's 3 to 5% inflation, and you can bump those numbers in your waterfall analysis. Go ahead. More takeaways. When writing a contract on investment property, you better include 2 things for your client, because I've seen people get screwed on this. All security deposits transfer to buyer at closing. I saw this take place with an agent before, not me, where they did not write that in the contract, that all security deposits transfer to buyer at closing. So guess what happened? The HUD statement came out. There was nothing on there that said all security deposits are transferring from seller to buyer. The seller fought it tooth and nail. This buyer was upset. The buyer's agent had to bring in the broker. It was crazy. Make sure you put it in the contract. All security deposits transfer to buyer at closing, and all rents are prorated to the closing date. Where to find investors now? I know we got a couple more minutes here. Facebook groups are incredible ways to network with investors. I am on at least 10 to 12 Facebook groups all over the Midwest. I was selling one of my clients, multifamily. I started jumping on Facebook groups in New York, Miami, East Coast, West Coast. Why? Because investors in those areas are buying up Midwestern property very quickly, because You buy in the Midwest for cash flow. You buy on the coast for appreciation. A lot of investors want to buy in the Midwest, but how are they going to find the deals? Well, Facebook groups is one way. Go ahead, Wayne, click on the next couple. RIA meetings, Real Estate Investors Association meetings. So, for example, I got a big old binder here, REIA of Greater Cincinnati, Real Estate Investors Association of Greater Cincinnati. Find your local RIA. They have monthly meetings. It's a great way to network. I've got multiple agents that I work with here in Cincinnati that go to our RIA meetings once a month. Networking events. They're constantly doing networking events too. It might be coffee at a Panera where a group of 5 to 10 are meeting up. Try to get in with those groups. All right, Wayne, couple more slides and we'll be done. What do investors want to hear? Again, I'm just trying to hammer this home. Speak their lingo. Mention ways to help them save more money on their building. Go ahead. One of these ways is a cost segregation study. Another one is a 1031 tax exchange. When you mention that to your investor, they're going to be like, dang, that agent knows what they're talking about. Those two items will save your investor so much money. Always, 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 though, explain to your investor the importance of a great CPA and be ready to refer them to one as soon as that to one that is an investor themselves. I'm sorry. I read this in a book years ago that said the CPA is one of your most important members of your real estate investing team. So if the CPA is not investing in real estate, you probably don't want to use them as your CPA. My CPA I use right now, he came in, presented a couple months ago to our Liberty office. He invests in real estate. He understands the nuances of it. All right, next page. We are finished. All right, just in time, 10:55. I know that was a lot of information in a 50-minute period. Again, some of this stuff is very detailed, but the overall goal of mine today was to give you guys some of the lingo, some of the terminology, the vocab, because I've seen it happen before. I've seen an investor talk to a real estate agent where the real estate agent had no idea what any of these terms meant. The investor knew 10 times more than the real estate agent, and the investor told me once that real estate agent left, there's no way I would ever use them to represent me because they don't know what this stuff means. This doesn't mean you have to go out and get a PhD in real estate investing, but you've got to know what some of this terminology means, because that will give you maybe a second chance for a cup of coffee with this investor to maybe do a one-on-one with them and do a presentation. I've actually got a real estate presentation on my laptop that I show potential investors that are on the fence of whether they want to start investing or not. All right, does anybody have any questions? I know a few of you on here are investors as well. So any questions about anything that I talked about here?
Hey, Dan.
Hey, Davos.
All right, it's very nice. Only one question about the drop and swap. So
yes,
LLC in Ohio and investor is LLC in out of state. How that work?
Okay, so what you can do for an out-of-state investor is you can have a local law firm here in Cincinnati, in Ohio. They will actually transfer the entity to an Ohio LLC right before closing. It's just one extra document. Then the buyer will buy that new LLC, and therefore the entity is not triggering the property valuation.
Thank you.
We're doing that same exact thing with my investor right now in the 7 unit that we're closing on. The law firm is creating the LLC. The buyer pays for it, not the seller. The buyer pays for the law firm to create the new LLC in the state of Ohio. Then the buyer will buy, or the buyer will buy that LLC, which owns the real estate. and it does not trigger the auditor. Good question.
Wow, you're right. That was a lot, but I'm going to just add a couple things and well reiterate that, you know, if you've never worked with an investor, just don't think that, like Dan said, you don't need to know absolutely everything at this point, you know. But if an investor walked up to me and mentioned cap rate, and I said, "What's that?" they're gone. You know, hey, what's the cap rate? Now I can be like, okay, cap rate, I get it. I'll figure that out for you. You know, you don't need to do it like on the spot. You know, so just know, like Dan mentioned, just start learning the terminology. Just be familiar with it, and then 3 conversations, 5 conversations. Then it's gonna start just coming to you. So that that's just one thing that just make sure like go out and have conversations today. To start getting better. Find investors, like join the groups that Dan mentioned, so that you can just listen or read stuff on Facebook. They're talking about cap rates and stuff, so lots of good stuff there. Actually working with an investor, plus kind of getting familiar with them in the lingo and all that, and just being comfortable enough to not be scared. I mean, they're just people. They just have a certain, they're not looking for a 3-bedroom 2-bath home that they're going to make. They want numbers, like Dan mentioned. So kind of lots there to just to absorb, but get out there and get out there and start absorbing it, because man, they seem to be everywhere, even if they're not like buying. There are just so many folks that seem to be interested in it, and it could just be a great little, I always kind of consider investors maybe like a side job to my real estate. It's like, I have all my buyers and sellers, and then I have these investors that that just can, and Dan, can just keep coming around and repeat clients, just because you took care of them. So.
All right, we got one question here from Kathy in the chat. She wants to know if this is the same in Florida. I'm assuming, Kathy, you're meaning the drop and swap. That is very common to use all around the country. I unfortunately am not licensed in Florida. I've never done a deal in Florida. I can't answer that for you, but I can tell you from my networking that the drop and swap is a widely used way for investors to purchase investment property without flagging the county auditor to reappraise that to the new purchase price. So I would check with who in Florida would know. There's got to be Wayne does. Mark Van Koski, he does. He works with a lot of investors. Rebecca Geiger, I think, does as well. I bet they would probably
Kathy,
know.
let me just do a little research. We'll kind of find someone that is in Florida that might be able to help us, just with kind of some of the some of the maybe nuances of what Dan was talking about. But if that's it, if you're kind of talking about everything else Dan was talking about as well, just know that cap rates, all of that are the same across the board. There's all the number part of it, as far as purchasing options and the best way to purchase stuff. I kind of always even throw that, like you mentioned, Dan, to an attorney, to like talk to your CPA and see if an LLC is better, see if a S corp is better, whatever. So but very cool. Yeah, she did say the drop and swap. So I'll inquire with some folks in Florida, Kathy, and see if we can't just, see if someone knows about it. So. Well, thank you so much, Dan. The passion just flows out of you. It's so much fun to listen to you talk about investing. So I love it, and I appreciate you taking the time to do it for us.
You are welcome. Hopefully everybody got one thing out of it. So glad to talk again privately if anybody ever wants to reach out.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Dan. Take care. Take care, everyone.
Thanks. See ya.